Cool. Right. Good to be back. Nice to see you. Nice to see you both again. And Jonathan will be joining us.
Jonathan says, "I'm here."
He is here. Hi, Jonathan.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Yay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just I'm going to give it like a 2-minute overview of what we talked about last week, and then introduce the theme. And we'll use the same format as we did last time, which was basically this is open conversation with hopefully it's like a few red threads. I do want to focus just on this particular phrase that I'm highlighting here. Let's get my little pointer out. Can I get my pointer out? Where's it gone? There. Is that my laser pen? Laser pointer. There we go. This one here. Let me in, because I am you yourself. I am your true nature, your very humanity. We're going to be really trying to dig deeper into this. I mean, it's I am you. Okay, so who am I? This question, we want to come to grips with that. Anyway, what's the journey we've taken so far? Basically, what we've been the idea that we've been playing with is that there is this being called Sophia, who existed both in, it was experienced as a divine being who appeared to people of a certain state of consciousness, both in the Hebrew people and under the name of Chokmah, and Sophia in ancient Greece. We then looked at Philosophia, Lady Philosophy, who visited Bertius in his cell. Didn't develop very much. Also, the other angle with Dante and the Vita Nuova, I just touched on it. Would love to have done more there, but she was there again, inspiring somebody to use their reason rather than be exposed to the vicissitudes of Lady Luck, Lady Fortuna. Yeah. And then we came to, that was still Philosophia. Then we came to this questions what is this Anthroposophia that Steiner is talking about, that he talks about right at the end of the Riddles of Philosophy, and that's where we left it. So now we're up to date as to the next part, and I think this will be my understanding so far at the moment is this is going to be the second third of a 3-part get together to talk around this. I'm going to talk about Darwin in the Riddles of Philosophy. When we started the second part, we came into contact with encasement theory, the idea that humanity had for a while that basically there was no development. Everything was latent and inbuilt in nature. Everything was predefined by God, and it was just a matter of unfurling it. They had these weird and wonderful ideas about how it's like in an egg, it's like in the egg in a womb, that was already a fully formed human being, and it just needed to expand, and then it would be there. There was no concept of evolution. And then along comes Darwin, and Haeckel and Goethe, and they are really part of this new stream of understanding that evolution is a fact. Evolution is a defining part of reality, and the rest of humanity basically went along with it, but they went along with the Darwinian version. Oh, sorry, correction. They went along with a materialistic interpretation of Darwinism, and this is key, because actually what we're going to be looking at here is digging into this, what is evolution, but not from the materialistic, but from a soul and spiritual aspect here. What does it really mean to be a soul in development, a soul evolving, and a spirit also? So we're moving away from this static conception. And it's actually, we might be tempted to think that like evolution is a new thought. Darwin was the first guy that struck upon it. But there it is, right at the beginning of the Bible. It's there, 7 days of creation. God didn't, life wasn't birthed in an instant. That was also a process. And that's where I want to dig around in here. So I think I've got, I'll save that for the next one. So any thoughts from the three of you about anything that I've said, or just other things that you think are relevant to the conversation here about evolution in a spiritual or soul meaning?
I think one thing to note is it is very interesting that at the same time as Darwin and people before and around him were coming out with this materialistic theory of evolution, whereby they purely looked at the forms, the bodily forms, and how one bodily form may have evolved from another. There was also a very strong current of psychology that was developing at the same time. And it's quite interesting to note that the psychology didn't also develop a kind of an evolutionary theory, because on the one hand we have lots of people science was, people were discovering things, they were finding fossil records, and there was a lot of collation that had been going on, and it wasn't until Darwin and such came along that then all those scattered findings came into a world view of formal development. At the same time, we had a lot of psychological research, but perhaps it was that there just wasn't as much material, or there wasn't a single individual who was able to sort of gather the material into a developmental or evolutionary pattern.
And I think perhaps also the convincing power that Darwin and then Haeckel provide as to the truth of it, rather than it just being an idea to play with. It was taken to be a truth, and then people started applying it more rigorously, like you're saying, Jonathan, to psychology.
Then they did,
yeah, possibly.
I'm just wondering, just to sort of reiterate, just to underline it, why there was so much power in the formal, the material investigation, and not in the psychological. Go on, Sophia. It's just a question.
I would like to try and answer that question because it's something I think we failed to mention so far in the Riddles of Philosophy. Why is mathematics so persuasive? Why is it so persuasive? Why is natural science so persuasive? Because it helps us really understand things. We don't have to. There's a level of certainty there that's not there in psychological processes. There's a vagueness about psychological processes, and that is the real. It's like not the one of those, like the fundamental aspects of why mathematics and this natural scientific way of viewing the world has been so powerful, because it's helped take away this superstitious aspect to knowledge, which was so prevalent. It's like playing with ideas. It becomes, no, we're not just playing with ideas. Our ideas help us to model reality far more accurately than ever before, and to tease out problems that before that were unsolvable.
I was
Sophia,
just
looks
gonna
like you're ready to
say,
say something there.
yeah. So I before this session, I have my Liddell and Scott with me. So I studied ancient Greek,
Yeah.
and I was looking at words that have theos in them. I think well, it means God, and
That's right, yeah.
and and I was thinking about the word theory. And if you think about the word theory, it actually starts with theos. And so I looked up theory, and it certainly talks about spectating and contemplating, but it has a spiritual element to it. So it's got a sacred element to it. And so just going on to mathematics and theories and science, my understanding is if we take that Greek, is it somebody said, was it Barfield said about languages of the fossils of what did he say? There was
fossils of consciousness.
Quite.
Yep.
And I think what the Greeks were trying to say to us is you can speculate and everything, but don't forget God's in there, and God's in the maths, and so I would actually propose that it's kind of that we've forgotten that element of it, that there's actually the two things that go side by side, and conveniently I think we've forgotten that. Yeah. So that was all really I was going to say.
Can I build on that, or did you want to say something, Jeff?
Just that in parallel to that, you could also say that just as alchemy turned to chemistry, and astrology turned to astronomy, I don't really have anything to say about it other than those are parallels. I mean, I do have something to say about it, but I'm not ready to say it. Those are parallels to the forgetting. And it is in Riddles of Philosophy where there's a certain sort of surety that was needed at the birth of the consciousness soul that mathematics started to provide. It's not that mathematics wasn't there with Pythagoras, who started a whole secret school utilizing mathematics as a, well, I mean, I wasn't there, but
yes, you were.
As utilizing mathematics in a sacred way, let's just say, there's a point at which, at the early, just post Enlightenment, when we were dealing with philosophers who were clearly needing some security, and I think it surrounds the forgetting was convenient, because certainly Goethe didn't forget. Right, but we ignored him largely.
Okay, so we've mentioned mathematics. You mentioned astronomy there. You could have mentioned geometria, logica, retorica, and musica. And why am I mentioning that? Because these weren't abstract concepts. These are the 7 liberal arts that people many centuries ago or millennia ago, they experienced them as real beings imparting knowledge to humanity. And it connects to what you're saying there, Sophia. There's a divine aspect to this that was, the ancients had a fundamentally different relationship to where they got knowledge from compared to where we are today, because since more or less it's like the 15th, 16th century, individual free thought has become a possibility for humanity. It's not an inspired, we're getting into tricky terrain here, but it's not the same type of inspired, revelatory knowledge that, for example, Thomas Aquinas refers to. He's like the doctor of angels. He's like his is inspired theology. And the further we go back from Thomas Aquinas in time, the more it is these beings inspiring human thinking, as opposed to human beings actively creating that understanding within themselves.
Just linking on to what Jeff said as well about surety. So my understanding is that once you've cut the cord from spiritual and you're stuck in material, that and this goes to Blake and I'm sure Goethe and many others, that's when you start to want the more and the more, and so it's more of a fear-based rather than a love-based position to be. And in that fear-based, you're more and more likely to want certainty and control. Right. And that kind of Ahrimanic, or McGilchrist would say left brain sort of ways of trying to control your reality. You fear death and so forth. So I think then once mathematics is taken from its proper mooring, it becomes dualistic and it twists and it becomes a weapon and it becomes more dangerous. Then it really was meant to be moored in the divinity. So it's sort of it's quite a broad theme there, but I think all of these things were meant to have a partner, a hieros gamos, and it seems that modernity likes to uncouple those partnerships, unfortunately.
What would be the partner to mathematics?
It's that divine element.
Oh, I see. So a part of it itself, right?
Yeah.
Rather than being used to describe the physical plane. Is that what you mean, Sophia?
So what I mean is that mathematics, it has a material, but it also has a spiritual, and the two need to be joined by, exactly. I call it a cord, like an umbilical cord. And the materialists come and they snip and pretend that the spirit, we don't need that anymore. And so you've got this half of mathematics that's now in the material realm that can be weaponized, it can be controlled. Whereas it was always meant to have that cord back to spirit, the spiritual realm.
Steiner mentions Novalis and his spiritual relationship to mathematics, which I think is we can't go into it here, but it's a very interesting idea to look at how you take this figure of Novalis who
lost his
brings mathematics into the soul rather than it just being dead thinking, which it is to many mathematicians. It becomes an experience of beauty. It becomes an experience of wisdom. But there was something else. Oh, yeah. Coming back to what you were saying there, Sophia, about this tension. The next book for Matt's group is The Philosophy of Freedom. And freedom is inconceivable if we haven't cut the umbilical cord. And so I think that is also an interesting perspective on this was, let's call it a divine, from an anthroposophical position. I don't think I'm misstating if I say that this was a divine necessity. If we were truly to become free, independent beings, then we have to move away from home. We have to leave our parents. We have to be the prodigal son or the prodigal daughter that so like that cuts the cord, and then of its own free volition returns to the spiritual world.
I think Jeff will probably, because he knows the freedom book inside out and upside down. But my understanding is that it's a freedom of necessity, isn't it, Jeff, or something like that? So I think what Steiner was saying, and I'm not an expert, I've read bits of the book, but it's more that there is still that mooring to the soul, and the freedom is to evolve the soul as it was meant to be evolved. So that it's not that you're totally free. You still have that umbilical cord, but you're actually freeing all the rest of the rubbish that you've acquired in order to eventuate that necessity of the soul, was my understanding.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And what Angus is suggesting is that in the evolution of consciousness, freedom, in a sense, was inevitable, which is kind of a paradox, because it's only inevitable if you take it up, but it inevitably had to be taken up in the way that you're suggesting. And humanity itself could then develop a psychology, which it didn't, and an educational system, which it only did in one instance, that supported that process. So it's not a given that that we're going to take freedom up. That's the irony of the moment, I think. And yes, freedom is not just another word for nothing left to lose.
When we come to freedom philosophy, things like Spinoza's explanation for why we aren't free and how Steiner transforms that will be like very interesting to look at. But it's like it's a little bit outside the scope of this conversation. But
I did want to say,
flag it
as relates to the decoupling of the alchemical wedding, say, that needs to occur. The pairing is always there. The other side is always there. It's just that they become enemies of each other, and that's the nature of the culture war right now. I think is underlying this is that. Well, I'm of two minds about it. One is that has to be solved. The other is that it's a symptom of the time, and that impulse is an organic impulse that results in those symptoms. But also that we because freedom is the watchword here as relates to development and evolution, I would suggest, which we'll get into. We have to recouple them on purpose, with purpose. So this means that the Humean Kantian picture of the unknowable mystery, whether it's through this fake monism or an acceptance of dualism as an absolute state, which are both the same thing, because they both end up shutting out the mystery. We have to decouple ourselves from instrumentalism, which is based on the idea that probability and predictability are the watchwords of science, and that's not good enough. And many scientists of our time, the vocal ones, suggest that's all we have, are models all the way down. And models predict and are used to predict in relationship to probability, and then that just leads to utilitarianism, which, when we get into Riddles of Philosophy and we deal with the pragmatists, they're like apologists for this whole damn thing.
Okay, I'm going to move us forward. I'm going to read this. We're back, so like straight into Sophia, Philosophia, Anthroposophia here. So if we take this idea of evolution seriously, which we certainly do, what might it mean both for ourselves and for this being. So I'm going to read this and then listen to your reflections and then my own reflections on this. Okay. So this is taken from lecture January the 10th, 1915, GA 161. This might surprise you. I hope it does. It surprised me. He says in this lecture, you find that shown in detail in my book. I've ripped this from a conference, obviously, and here he's referring to the Riddles of Philosophy. Then it being the being that we're talking about here, then it lives upwards to the time when a human being experiences the events between the 14th and the 21st year. And this is the age of Greek philosophy, Greek thought. Then comes the next 7 years, what man experiences from the age of 21 to 28. The Christ impulse enters the development of philosophy. Then comes the period from Scotus Erigena up to the New Age. This being develops in the following 700 to 800 years, what man develops between the ages of 28 and 35. And now we are living in the development of what man experiences in his consciousness soul. We are experiencing the consciousness soul of philosophy, of philosophical thoughts. Philosophy has actually come into its 40s. He's saying here, Lady Philosophy is 40 plus years old now. Only it is a being that has a much longer duration of life. 1 year in a man's life corresponds to 100 years in the life of the being of philosophy. So we see a being passing through history for whom a century is a year, evolving in accordance with sun laws, though one is not aware of it.
So she was born 4,000 odd years ago.
Your maths is good. Absolutely. That's right. Yep. So what was happening? What was happening there, Jonathan? 2100 BC, more or less.
The Greek, the ancient Greek.
No, we're before then, because the ancient Greeks, they only started their philosophy. So like was really happening very grossly. It's like between 700 to 0 BC.
Yeah, fair enough.
So we're talking like 1400 years before then. What was happening in the world? This world-shaking, transformative event.
The incarnation of Ariman. Lucifer.
We're talking about the founding of the Hebrew religion. This is when Abraham receives his mission from Melchizedek to go along, to popular your generations will be as populous as the number of the stars in the heavens, or something like that.
Okay.
So what he's suggesting here, and we're going to dig into the details. What he's suggesting here is that Lady Philosophy basically started making her appearance at the time that Abraham was giving the impulse towards where we are today. And what was Abraham? Abraham was, amongst other things, amongst the Hebrews, called the father of mathematics. I've got lots more details around that, and I didn't actually intend to dig into that level of detail just yet. But any other thoughts on?
I have a question.
Yeah.
What was happening in the rest of the world at that time? What was happening in China, for example? Where does Confucius and Jonathan hinted at the incarnation of Lucifer in human form?
That was supposedly, according, from my understanding, that was around about 3100 BC, so 1,000 years prior to this.
Okay. But I thought
Okay.
if the incarnation of Ahriman's now, it's mirrored on the other side of Christ.
But that doesn't correspond, because if it was
Yeah.
3100 BC, then it would be
Yeah.
3100 more or less
Yeah,
AD. But it
Yeah.
does fall into the Kali Yuga, so like the Dark Ages. Like if we're talking about Oriental thinking, in that sense, there's a correspondence, but it doesn't mirror perfectly around the Golgotha event.
Okay.
And this was when they found the first writings in Mesopotamia, wasn't it? The 4th millennia BC.
That's right. And the first novel, Gilgamesh.
And it's also when the divine feminine was starting to be destroyed. So this was...
We're moving from matriarchy to patriarchy.
When we you're onto a really important and interesting topic there, Sophia. I'm not sure we'll manage it today, but when we look at like the Greek myth of Osiris and Isis and Seth and Horus, we can dig deeper into the murder of it's like what happened to Isis. It's like in that relationship, because very simplistically, anthroposophical thinking says that Lucifer's like disempowered sounds like it's like an insufficient word, but robbed humanity of the divine feminine of Isis and replaced it with his own being, a corrupted version of divine wisdom is basically but well, perhaps we can like dig into that when we get to that slide.
That is interesting.
So this is interesting because we talk about evolution on 2 stages, and I did want to look at like the human life before we look at the life of Sophia, or Lady Philosophy, in here, more as like an opportunity to talk about it more and also as a way of perhaps informing people who might end up watching this video and thinking, what on earth are they talking about? So I thought we would go there. So let's focusing on the individual human life. What's he talking about between the ages of 0 and 7, 7 to 14, and all of this? Okay, next slide. So if I'll start this, and Sophia's flagged that she wanted to talk about soul, so I'll let Sophia take over at least, and the others as well, once I've given a brief intro to what's happening in the first 21 years of our life, according to an anthroposophical way of thinking. Yeah, it is quite simply this. We are creating...
Well, it's not really according to an anthroposophical way of thinking, but it's according to a realistic looking at what goes on.
Yeah, I think the reason I choose that is because this way of understanding the development of human being is restricted to people who've done some form of anthroposophical study. You do have awareness in child psychology of phases of development, definitely, Piaget and all his work. But so like this, I mean, the etheric body doesn't exist for natural science.
Yes.
So they're in on the idea of evolution, but they're in no way in alignment with this anthroposophical view about like these what's happening.
Yeah, but I think it's important. I flagged it up because, and it's a very contentious point in a sense, because either this is a science and so it's looking at reality, or it's just another model. And, that's what many people would like everything to be. So you can just choose your model and they're all relevant and it just depends on your preference or whatever. But the contention is that, no, this isn't just another idea, but this is actually a proper view.
Based in reality. Yeah.
So what's a better way to put it? Let's say, according to spiritual scientific research, here is the trajectory of the human being from birth to, in this case, 49 years old, or 56, 63.
63, yeah.
Yes.
63 and plus.
And according to spiritual science in its research, every it's a 7-year cycling. Right? So how does that relate to physics? How does it relate to all sorts of things that in neurology, and those questions are a spiritual science that's not afraid of natural science, but utilizes its method, would suggest that it's fulfilling some of the seed concepts in natural science. And so I support that, Jonathan. I think that's worth keeping in the phenomenal realm of how we engage with this material.
Yeah. So, spiritual scientific view on the first 21 years of our life is that the predominantly the incarnating human being is most occupied with building the physical instrument of the body. And somewhere okay, I've got a message there. Then usually at the changing of the sorry, I'm wrong there. With the onset
the change of the teeth is.
I was going to get to the teeth, but I'm muddling it up. No, it's the second teeth, when the second teeth begin to come. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's like that is an it's like a recognition of it's like evidence of the idea that's like we're entering into a new phase where it's like the etheric forces that have been used to build the body, the same etheric forces that build a plant, that they are, whilst not completely finished with their job, they're starting to develop like the etheric body itself. It's like the etheric body is like is the focus of development, and that's when we have, like, for example, the onset of memory. So the ability to memorize things is something that is nested in the etheric body. That's not saying that children can't remember before 7 years old, but that this faculty becomes a lot more accessible. It becomes freer. So it's one of the ways of describing it.
And the change of teeth into your second teeth is a significant symptom of that, because it denotes those etheric forces have now reached down into the material so deeply that they can get those hard teeth that you're going to have for the rest of your life. So now they've done that, and they can free up some of their energies for these other things you're talking about.
Another way to look at this is that the etheric body being freed allows the memory to become individualized as opposed to cosmic, say. So it's not that they don't have memories, it's that their memories are associated with their origins, the origins of the person that's incarnating. So the in the first 7 years, the child is also overcoming the inherited body, which is why childhood illness is one of the important factors in the grappling with the inherited body in order to individualize a birth of the etheric body, say, to the extent that they've been able to develop that through karma, through previous incarnations.
And also there's this idea that this is also the time, it's actually only at this stage, around about the 7 year mark, that the baby, the child, becomes fully independent. There's this idea of sharing an etheric body with the mother. I'm not like well informed on the details, but I remember like hearing this idea that there is still a more intimate connection at an etheric level with the mother until like around about the 6-7 year old mark.
It's interesting also to line this up with what's going on in history at this 0 to 7 age, because the idea of reincarnation, karma and reincarnation, was a fact. It wasn't a belief system, as reflected in Pherecydes and Pythagoras. They were aware of the transmigration of souls, say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So so the etheric body, so like it starts developing or it gives us young beings like new faculties that weren't there previously. And then so like we hit puberty. Obviously it's like puberty's happening younger and younger, so like kids of like 10, 11 nowadays. It's not unusual, especially in urban areas, tend to reach maturity, sexual maturity. It's like a lot earlier than like according to this model, but it's still the same basic idea that when puberty hits, so like something new is happening in the soul, that we've got like the birthing of the astral life. It's not like we didn't have emotions and an inner life before, but it takes on a new expression, and this is intimately related to sexual maturity, beginning of interest in the other sex, and these type of things, and an awareness of an inner feeling life. It's this awareness of an inner feeling life that it becomes new. We had it before, but now we're becoming more aware of how it steers us, how it affects us, and yeah. So that's the first, so like 21 years, like very simplistically, like explained, and then we move into the next 21 year period, which is the development of like 3 aspects of the soul: the sentient soul, intellectual, and the consciousness soul. And perhaps somebody would like to like come in here and give their own thoughts on what is the sentient soul, what is the intellectual soul, what is the conscious soul, these aspects of our inner life that are being developed during this period.
I was just looking at timelines, because thinking where the being Sophia is at these times in history. But the sentient soul kind of speaks for itself in the sense that that's the part of the soul that is grounded in the astral body the closest. So it's directly related to the sensations and impressions from the world. But it's because it's the soul, it's the part of us that relates directly to that. So what we feel about those things are our loves and hates and so forth.
And how would that be different, for example, from, because an animal has an astral body, but it doesn't have a sentient soul. It has a soul body. The astral body, you could say, is the soul body, but the sentient soul is something else. So how are we different if we think about in relationship to just the feeling life?
Yeah.
How are we different from animals?
The animal has a soul in the sense that the sentient soul and astral body, you could say, are one. So there's no, in that sense, there's no separation. So their feeling response is just immediate to their sensual impression. So, if they see something they don't like or something, they let out a yelp. But because when you have a separation, then it's more of an internal thing. So because we have an individuality developing, so then you can feel your emotions without expressing them. They can be held inside. So then there's a separation between I can see something and I can feel something about it, but they're not the same, tied up immediately in the same response.
Yeah, that's you could also say that I like that collapsing of the sentient soul with the astral, rather than suggesting maybe that there's a sentient experience, but it's the cognition, say, for lack of a better word in this case, is instinctual, whereas for us it's potentially intuitional in the development, in human development, because we have feelings that let's just say that this suggests also that feelings are a potential cognitive capacity.
Yeah, and then the question kind of is why, and so then we look at the further development of the soul.
Can I sorry, I just wanted to say something. So there's an ancient Greek myth, Psyche and Eros, like a love story, and it relates to as well the evolution of a particular energy from maiden to mother to crone, and looking at those sort of soul elements there, I'd see potentially that maiden mother crone evolution happening in that period of time. And I think somebody mentioned before about like a rebirthing, and so going into, and we haven't read it yet, but that notion of going into the underworld and coming out as something totally different. And so it potentially is. I'm thinking about Psyche as she's left as like a votive offering on top of a mountain, waiting for a serpent husband to come and kill her or marry her at 14. And then she goes into the castle where she can't see her husband, and she's not allowed to see in the dark the sentient soul. And then the mind soul is the doubt. Her sisters come, and the doubts. Oh, who have I married? I want to see him. I'm going to get the candle and look at him, and the hot wax drops onto him, and he wakes up. And then that consciousness soul is her awakening then, and realizing that she's got choices that she's got to make. He's gone. And she goes to Aphrodite and says, I want him back. I love him. And she says, right, well, you've got all of these different things that you've got to do. You've got to go back into the underworld again and come out as spirit self potentially. So I just wanted to sort of bring that concept of going into the underworld, which I think as humans we do, even though the hero's journey, it's quite masculine and whatever, and we only seem to go in there once. I actually see this cycle that we go into the underworld more than once, and we come out differently, both if it's twice or however many times, we come out different each time. There's different question, a different story.
Yeah, Steiner emphasizes time and again how much wisdom there is in mythological thinking and in fairy tales as well. And I think that's what you're picking up on there, Sophia. They are so rich in imagery, but like any literature, can be understood at various levels. And the higher, they're not static in that sense. So that you can arrive at an understanding, and then you work with that understanding, and suddenly something else also can grow out of that understanding. So really nice contribution. A little reflection from my part. I think comparing us to animals, one way in which we are radically different from animals is that we can desire things that are not in front of us. So we have this capacity to create or to have feelings about things that aren't present to the senses. And this is an aspect of the sentient soul, and it's like a beginning of a individual inner life, not an inner life that's 100% connected to the external world. I'm a dog, I see a bone, I have to run to that bone and eat it. It's no, I can actually imagine I'm sitting here, it's like having be nice to have a cup of coffee. Let's perhaps in quarter of an hour I'll make a cup of coffee, this type of thing. Animals can't do that. They don't plan, they don't sort of like plant emotions into themselves. The world, a little bit like the Greeks, it's like the way Steiner describes the Greeks, so like the world presented itself together with thoughts. And for an animal, I see the relationship as somewhat similar. It's like I smell something, I follow it. I'm going to keep using this like the dog metaphor. Or so like there's a bitch on heat. I know what I got to do. It's instinct. Everything is instinct. There's no reflection in there. So that's one way of turning an empty concept into something that's more full of life. The other way is looking at it from the perspective of, okay, we also know that the Egyptian period was the period when we are told that that's when the sentient soul was being developed. What was going on, if we wanted to sort of like generalize about the Egyptians, what was going on there? Well, they were really scared of death, weren't they? They were scared of death. So like they thought about death the whole time. What's going to happen when we die? Does a dog ever think about that? No, it doesn't. It gets on with its life and it dies at the end. It's not worrying itself with death. It's not asking itself questions about something that isn't there already. And this is also an aspect of the sentient soul, that this inner life begins to separate itself off from the immediate, or it has the possibility of separating itself off from the immediately given through perception. Mind soul, intellectual soul. What should we say about that?
Well, as mentioned before, how is the sentient soul able to have independent thought? So, just sort of very simply, this is, instead of just emotionally responding to the world, this is then conceptually responding to the world. So it's the birth of a more considered, a more kind of interior relationship to the world.
Perhaps I just realized we skipped out a very, very important fact here, is that 21 more or less is when the I, it's like the true I, is born.
The keys to the door.
And this is the I integrating itself, living itself, first of all, into the astral body. Then the I lives itself into the etheric body. And then finally, in the conscious soul, the idea is that it lives itself into the physical body. And this is why it's like all of these soul experiences that are like through this 21 to 42-year-old period, they are the body is an instrument that the eye uses to understand the world, but it does it through inner experience as opposed to experiencing everything as outside. This is you've got this switch where the outer world has become the inner world.
Yes, well, in a sense, it is a continuation, because the sentient soul is where you're sort of born to yourself. So, when you're young, you do experience the world, but it's more through your own. You're forging your own way. It's your own sort of impulses. And again, here with the intellectual or mind soul, you're understanding the world through your soul, through your interior life, which then changes when we come to the consciousness soul, where we actually find a real sharp distinction. There's the external world, and we're not that. So, then that question arises: what are we? What am I? Can I become conscious of my soul? Not live through it or with it.
There's an ability to start to be able to work with the inner life. When we're dealing with the sentient soul, we become more awake to how the inner life, the inner feeling life, affects us. But when we are able to use rationale, the intellect, the mind soul, we can start, rather than just experiencing ourselves as experiencers of the inner life, there might be an aspect of our inner life that we're not happy with. So we try to change ourselves. And again, it's not like it didn't happen before, but there's a more active participation in trying to change one's inner relationship to life, and understanding that I am not a product of life solely, but I am also the creator of my own life. And this becomes a much more concrete, real possibility for people in this age. So in this period when when we're developing this faculty. And again, we're not saying that people can't change their lives before, but this is the time in life where we can work more consciously and through our understanding to make those transformations. So just, it's like picking up on, it's like Sophia. So someone like Jordan Peterson becomes very inspiring, because this is a person talking about how you use thinking and rationale to make smarter decisions so that you can lead the type of life you want to lead. Whereas before, you were much more happy, much more content in letting life happen. Now we're beginning to say, let's assert a bit more control.
We can also frame this whole diagram. Sorry, it's not a diagram. Sorry, but as if we can try and imagine it almost as a womb, like there's 3 different wombs here. So the first one is we're forming a body in a societal womb from 0 to 14. In the second womb, the second womb is actually a body womb. And in that body womb, we are forming a soul baby in that body womb. And then in the third womb, it's now a soul womb. And that soul womb is helping to the God essences to come in and do what they need to do. So we are, and this is quite biblical. It's like it very much links to Jesus and the concept of sacrifice, is that we become a channel something else to come through us. And so our soul then becomes a womb for these godlike forces to come through. So we've got a spirit, we've got a societal womb, we've got a body womb, and then we've got a soul womb. Yeah, and so those different wombs are birthing in different ways. And I love Dostoevsky in Crime and Punishment, where he talks about Sonia and that concept of her heart is the vessel where I can grow and develop. And so we really get then into that concept of true love in that third womb as being a vessel for something else to be created. So yeah, I just wanted to put that in as well.
Cool.
Did you want to say something there, Jonathan? It looked like
No. That's great.
And we can play with the idea as what is the Virgin Sophia in esoteric literature. It is a purified soul body that is capable of receiving healthy, sound, Christ-like impulses. And the important thing here is, not the important thing, I shouldn't use that, is that one of the really interesting aspects here is that this growth of soul with the I, my soul becomes the birthing place for higher spiritual impulses, for the revelation of Sophia, Philosophia, Anthroposophia, or for the 7 liberal arts, these type of ideas. Of course, if I don't believe in those type of ideas, then they can't be given birth to inside me. They can't come and visit me in the night. I might be like Psyche, who's like, I've opened my eyes, I've demanded proof, I've listened to doubt, and I've doubted the sincerity of the spiritual beings that are waiting there to come and somehow fructify.
Or you might
complete my life.
Or you might be like Narcissus, denying Psyche, denying the existence of Psyche, and losing himself in a reflective pool that is him, but he doesn't know it. So he falls transfixed with the surface of the waters of life. And then that's the death, right? Where the soul is experiencing the death of an identity, the death of the soul, in fact, for humanity at this time, because we've cut it out, surgically removed it, mechanically removed it, and mathematically have eliminated it without doubt. And that's a dangerous place to be, without doubt.
Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide unless somebody wants to add something. Okay, so the next couple of slides will be relatively quick because they're basically the same topic, but again, for completeness' sake. So what is it? What's going on here? Our individual lives, they are in evolution, but so is the earth in evolution. So we have this idea in spiritual science that this is the period in the Egyptian, Mesopotamian, or Babylonian civilization that's the principal faculty that was being developed in humanity was the sentient soul. And in the Greco-Latin, it was the mind soul. And in this one here, it's the consciousness soul. Consciousness soul often is also called spiritual soul, which can be somewhat confusing because the next one is the spirit self. But what we're seeing here is micro. It's an example of also another key thought in this type of thinking. Micro macrocosm. We are in our lives, in our own development. We are not unique. We are we are repeating a process that's also happening at a greater level. We're doing it at our own level, but it's something that the whole world is experiencing. And then one might ask oneself, so like, what's guiding this? So like at an epochal level, and we'll come to that. To the next slide again. So like again, this is just for completeness' sake. That also those 7 cultural epochs that we just saw a graphic for. There are 7 there. There are 7 there. There are 7 there, and there's 7 there, and there's 7 there. And in the future, there will be 7 and 7 there as well. So we're talking about a vision of history, a conception of evolution that is far, far richer than a materialistic Darwinian version of what evolution is. And I've just realized I've got one more slide as well, of course. And you got the planets as well. So we're not just like content with the whole history of Earth, but Earth is also itself the evolution of a body. And when you begin to zoom out like that, it's sort of like overwhelmingly beautiful.
Yeah, it becomes so much more joyous because we're not just talking about bodies of organisms becoming vehicles for, some kind of human experience that will end at some point, but it's that there's I was going to say choirs, there's the whole thing's absolutely brimming with life, and it's developing and evolving.
So it's a breathtaking scope. It's like we're presented with, thanks to the research of spiritual science. Okay, zooming back in again. So we go back to where our point of concern here is Sophia, Philosophia, Anthroposophia. So that quote that we read, so like a few slides back, one way of presenting what's going on there is we have this being, Sophia, who was there, it's like in 2100 more or less BC, who started her own developments with a physical body, this period here. And then, just like a repetition of us,
what do you mean beings, a physical body?
Is, yeah, the next, not one slide, but 2 slides on, I'm going to get into the details, but I have actually hinted at that when I was talking about Abraham. Okay.
Okay, I'll hold that.
Yeah. So the picture that he is presenting is that this being between 2100 to 1400, these figures are always sort of like approximate. It's like the predominant concern of this being, and who is this being, this Sophia being, that she was like concerned with creating a physical vehicle for the experience of herself. Okay, but who is this Philosophia, Sophia? Well, some of the if we I should have actually pulled up another graphic for this, but so I'll try to describe it because I think you'll be able to follow me. It's like the spirits of personality. We've got like above us, we've got the angels, archangels, archai, and then the spirits of personality. And it's the spirits of personality that have given us our I. If we go back 2 incarnations, we looked at Earth, Moon, Sun. On the Sun, we can ask ourselves the question, what were the beings going through their Earth experience of being endowed with an I, like we are as human beings? And those beings have a name. we only have to go up two ranks. Angels, archangels. Who's an archangel? Yeah, Michael is an archangel. At the moment, he's also archai, but he is an archangel. And who was the giver of his eye? It was the spirits of wisdom. It was the impulse behind this Sophia being. So very simplistically, if we were doing a family tree, we would say that the Kuriotetes,
The spirits of wisdom,
is the mother of Michael. And if we begin to understand who Michael is for spiritual science, we understand it is as the further higher principle above Michael, which is the inspirer of Michael to give us the cosmic knowledge. So she is the source, and Michael is he's the giver, but she is the source. And we can play with that relationship even more. So, and where is Sophia getting this from? She's getting it from the first hierarchy above her. So she is receiving it into herself, and she is the embodiment of all wisdom. And perhaps I'm really let's really go to town on this. I'm going to go all the way back to this slide. So I started us off with here. I am you yourself. I am your true nature, your very humanity. If we are ever going to understand who we really are, what we are saying here is we need to know ourselves. We need the wisdom of Sophia to understand I am yourself. She is the giver of that wisdom, and she sends it through Michael, her son. This is the picture that Prokofiev in his book, it's like he's building up for us, and all of this is based on spiritual science. So
I've just got a question here. Can evolution go backwards? Yeah. Because the way that we're speaking, I very much see in that spirit self, even the spirit self I see as being like this personality that is sending back to the soul self. This is your path. This is what you're meant to be doing. I know it's a little bit sort of confusing, but to me it feels very much that there's that future evolution is coming back in time or back in evolution. Maybe this is where Boethius comes in. Maybe that was the future Boethius or whatever, the spirit personality of Boethius that was coming back into his cell as he was about to die, which is quite ironic. Is there anything in Steiner or
absolutely
talking about backwards evolution?
As opposed to backwards evolution, which sounds like regression, it's more an idea of reflection. So it's like a key idea is that if we take the Greco-Latin period as a central point in time, that those experiences that we went through without individual consciousness in the Egyptian Mesopotamian period, that is, we are confronting them as individual human beings now, but they are somewhat simplistically saying they're the same nature of questions, but confronted at an individual level, as opposed to a group soul level. I don't know if you want to add something there, Jeff.
Just the mysterious statement that Steiner makes, which is that the gods are getting younger as we get older. and I forget what the context is for that, but I remember being struck by it pretty powerfully at the time, because there was a context, and he was talking about it in the terms that Sophia was just talking about. So
there is a link to the slide that we're looking at here, in the sense that I'll try to develop it, but if we think back to ancient India, that there's this idea that all the way into the 50s, people's bodies were part of the development process. Just living in a body automatically endowed you with wisdom. It's like, putting it very simplistically, it's like the natural evolution of like all of the different aspects of the body, soul, and spirit. That was given, the fruits were given to one without the individual having to take responsibility. And there's this idea that, so like, as we progress into the future, the amount of time in which we are automatically given something through like the gift of a body and an etheric body, an astral body, and a sentient soul, that we will have to, at ever younger ages, have to start taking individual responsibility for our development. And I'll try to give one example of what this might mean in concrete terms. So if we mentioned puberty earlier, astral body, sexual maturity. So there will come a time in the future, according to this model, when sexual maturity will not occur of itself. Humanity will cease to become fertile unless it takes matters into its own hands. This is just one example of how we are forced to, evolution is forcing us to become aware of all the gifts that the spiritual worlds have endowed us with. And we've got to reacquire everything that was given to us for nothing prior to so this is even prior to the mystery of Golgotha. Is that do you recognize what I'm saying there, Joe?
yeah, it also is reflected in the 7 life processes, in that we are sort of in the consciousness soul age at the point of what do you say, the point of just the heart and the sun phase of the evolutionary process in physiology, where we're discerning we're doing what the heart does, which takes up the blood and revitalizes it and uses what it can, and discards what is waste, so to speak. And then up through the 3 higher, or say higher, the 3 other life processes where it ends in reproduction, and that we where we're heading is the ability to reproduce ourselves physiologically, which is what Christ did, right? Right. So that's the ultimate freedom. We went down into the earth, and then resurrected the body through a complete mastery of the life processes physiologically. That's why it's a fact rather than a belief.
And in the divine feminine literature as well, the original divine feminine, and apparently Osiris is linked to this, which is kind of weird. Apparently, way back when we were very spiritual beings, there was something spiritually that the woman could do to create their own baby, so they didn't need a man to do it. Does that make sense?
Androgynous, yeah.
Yeah, androgynous. So Osiris is androgynous, apparently. So there is something that we've lost, that art, that spirituality, that whatever it is, that dimension of ourselves that allows us to be able to do that. So just as you were talking then, that sort of triggered in my mind. Also, there's a concept called garments of skin in the Bible. John Pageau is crazy about it. But when God throws Adam and Eve out of the garden, he throws with them garments of skin to protect them when they're out of Eden. And for me, when you were talking there about India and the body sort of having that inbuilt wisdom, and gradually as the epochs grow, that we're going to have to learn for ourselves. To me, I feel that Sophia was in us and then was stripped out and became this garment of skin that was there to protect us, but wasn't of us anymore. She was outside of us, and perhaps is gradually becoming more and more and more outside of us. And her garment of skin is becoming more and more sophisticated and complex. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that idea in the mix as well.
This thing about the mysteries of reproduction is interesting, both politically at the moment. I'll I mentioned that in brief, but just what you were picking up on there, Sophia, is interesting because so the if I've understood this correctly, eurythmy was developed as a means of visible speech, so that the larynx in the future can become that by which new life is created. So where the divine word is produced by ourselves, and we don't have, I mean, it sounds, these are amazing images. If you think about this idea that we things like birth has been with us since the beginning of time, but perhaps it wasn't always like this. Perhaps it hasn't been this physical process. I mean, sticking with the Bible story, I mean, what happened when Adam and Eve, well, yeah, you got birthing pains. That's for your troubles. Well, does that indicate that they weren't there before? Who knows? And one thing on a political note, and we won't go far down this rabbit hole, but there's a lady called Adriana Koalis, a very interesting Australian author, who on her Facebook has talked quite a bit about what might be the spiritual reasons, the spiritual background to what is going on in the Ukraine. And I think her line of reasoning, based in spiritual science, that there is a battle for the birth mysteries going on here, eugenics, is very interesting. It's very interesting to look at this conflict in that who will possess this wisdom in the future? Will it be the materialistic West, or will it be something that's conserved for a Russian soul? So there's lots of it. It's very interesting to see things from that perspective. Anyway, returning to Sophia. So etheric body, astral body, and sentient soul. And in the lecture, the GA 161, he outlines in more detail how the riddles of philosophy, this period that he's covering is from here to here. So as Sophia matures, so does our understanding of ourself and our life also mature. But we're coming to a very interesting point here. And this, again, we have to treat these dates very flexibly, because what it's indicating is up until in this period here, Sophia's development lagged our development. And for this period of time from 700 to 2100, her development actually coincides exactly with the only development of, if we think about the epochs that we're in, it maps well. But then around about this period, she becomes, she is developing a faculty that is ours. It will be the fate of humanity to develop this in the future. But those that are committed to developing their own understanding of spiritual science and doing their own spiritual research will be calling on the help of this being. It will be this being which will be inspiring those people that believe in her, that she will be filling those people with her wisdom. And this is so it's a key point that she is in advance of our own evolution, and therefore she will be like the again, it seems so trivial to use these terms, but she will be the leader. She will be the carrier of this impulse. But we have to, as individuals, choose to be part of that impulse. If we don't, it's not a this is a task for the sixth cultural epoch, but that we those people that choose to follow her earlier are going to be like the forerunners of this epoch. Yeah. Thoughts, comments, reflections?
You've just been talking about a moment about 80 years from now.
I think we have to be very careful with like fixing too much. A little bit like with the human biography.
Okay.
It's like it isn't when we're 14-year-olds. Bang, we have a bang. It's like sexuality is turned on, and bang, 6-7 years old we get our teeth.
Right.
These are fluid moments. They grow into us. But we still, if we have to choose a time when it's going to be become more salient, then we could choose this period. But it's already happening, just like in the 7 years in our own lives. It's like that period, because that period is from 35 to 42. We don't suddenly go from developing an intellectual soul to developing a consciousness soul. This is a process, and this is also a process here. And some people will arrive at it later, and some people will arrive at it sooner. And we also don't know exactly. But this is the indications that Steiner is giving us that it is around about this period.
Yeah. I'm interested in the timing because to track it to current events and to the near future events where things seem to be heading, and so wondering, I think we're going to need a lot of wisdom. We need it now. We're going to need it even more very soon. I feel. So wondering of her development, and then how many of us will be able to work in accord with that too, to assist us
to work consciously
on okay, so what falls out of the current conflict, etc.
Yeah. I'm troubling through I don't even have a question yet, but on one hand we have an ascending Sophia coupled with the evolution of consciousness in humanity, and on the other we have a descending coming from the future and incarnating into humanity as wisdom. And I'm trying to puzzle through this. I mean, what clearly she's drawing nearer to humanity in the descending sense, which I guess would suggest in the ascending sense she'll be leaving us, leaving parts of humanity in her dust. I hope without a sense of revenge for the harms we've done to her. But it's a question, really. What is the relationship of a spirit of wisdom descending into the human frame and her evolution alongside of humanity in an ascending sense?
Yeah.
I would say. Sorry, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I would actually say that she is expecting us to become the womb for her. So she's expecting us to develop our souls such that we become a vessel for her.
Are you suggesting then that without us to do that, then her development will be hindered in some way? Or is her development going to go on regardless?
I think those of us that aren't vessels, she's just going to smash straight through.
Ouch.
And, I think she's been telling us for a while now, like Jordan Peterson would say, get your room in order. I think she'd say, get your room in order.
Get your room in order. You've got to write that book.
And the Bible's kind of warned about this, hasn't it? It's sort of said that not everybody is going to survive this one. It's a new Jaya coming in, and the birthing is going to be extremely painful if we don't get our wombs in order.
Yeah.
Go on, Jeff.
Just that the Narcissus myth also is a warning of what happens when the soul is denied. When this is also related to that statement that Steiner makes about how the higher self is outside us, and the kingdom. What's the Christ saying? The kingdom of heaven is found within.
Close at hand.
Yeah, is found within, which is a founding within, as I mentioned in our previous talk. So yeah, that also speaks to the ascension descension picture.
And the womb building.
And so as I think we can also play with the idea of like a splitting into humanity of like a stream that is consciously trying to reascend, and one that's like will continue to abide in a materialistic an Ahrimanic world.
I think we have to be careful about being too judgmental in that respect, though, and I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying probably I am, because that is the death process that the consciousness soul, excuse me, the consciousness soul has to go through. So accepting being transforming the material world is to inhabit the material world in a complete way. And there's a moment where you sort of have to go behind the moon.
I'd like to share an image that I think is useful and demonstrating what you're talking about. We have to be very careful about this. This isn't a cut-off point. Everything's going to happen 2100. Again, it's difficult to know how well to assess this. Valentin Tomberg is a controversial figure in Anthroposophy, but quite clearly is like a phenomenal student when he was part of it. And whilst he was part of it, he wrote books. There's a book called Christ and Sophia, which is on my shelf somewhere, by a guy called Robert Powell, hugely interesting guy. And in this book, he describes how one way of imagining the sixth epoch, the Russian epoch, is we will have in the higher climes of the northern hemisphere, that these will be people who are more attuned to the spirit, and then in the climes like closer to the equator, you will have people that are slightly more in tune with the Aramanic spirit. And we've got this middle ground for all of these souls that still haven't decided. So the picture he's giving is of a 2000, at least a 2000 year period, where souls will be looking to the north and looking to the south and deciding which way they will go. And I think the reason I like that is because it's not this idea of a selected few. It's the idea of this is a long process. Humanity doesn't have to. I mean, it'd be better if it did wake up now, but it's not a question of waking up now will be doomed forever. It's this process that humanity is going through, and we will have multiple attempts, multiple possibilities to address this question seriously, and in a culture where the spirit isn't dead to the extent that it is dead in our current epoch, that it's a more living reality where we see whole culture taking this Tomberg's image. If I look north, what do I see? This is a manifestation of this way of viewing the world. If I look south, this is a manifestation of what the other worldview means. And each individual will make a decision. Do I move north or do I move south? Using this image as a reality. And again, I don't know to what extent it's based in Steiner's research, because unfortunately, Tomberg is a lot less, not nearly as good as someone like Prokofiev in sourcing his pictures, his images.
I think some were original to himself, were they not? Which maybe
Yeah.
It paints an extremely interesting picture of the world if in a radically different kind of communities. If I could sort of crudely put the division between a sort of materialistic culture and a culture based from out of the spirit, because can you imagine that you're living in the equator and you're like, okay, I'm in my robot car and everything, and I'm being sort of passaged between I'm probably living in a cube, working online somehow.
I live the fully connected life, don't I?
And then what would they then think about those folks up north who presumably that there's the same kind of tech, but they do medicine out of soul energy? What is that about? That doesn't make sense to me. That it sounds like a hugely different sort of cultures, imagining them each looking at each other.
But just look at us, guys. I mean, look at the culture we've grown up in, and nevertheless, we are still interested in spiritual questions, despite the fact that there is so little emphasis put on it. There is something about us that says this is important.
Mm-hmm.
And
can I just say as well,
what that voice sorry, go
on. So the consciousness soul is I would view that as being like in the soil, like azuric. It's the big place of rebirth, potentially creation, potentially destruction. And I think anybody listening to this might feel a bit worried, that something is going to happen and those mysteries have been taken from us. That Lucifer's taken the light away from us. And the picture really that and the reason I think that we're all very interested in this is because Sophia is a toroid. And if she's taken from the spirit, that's okay, because she's going to come up from the soil. And I think that's what we're getting in Sophia, is grounded in the soil and the darkness. And so she's always there with us, and she will come up through our roots. We won't necessarily get her coming through intellectually. So anybody that was listening to this getting worried, going, well, how do I know? It is a case of meditation and connecting with that darkness and that underworld, I suppose. That's where you're going to find her, and anyone can find her. It's not that the Knights Templars have all been killed and we're just not, we're never going to find those mysteries. They are there for us to find.
Perhaps this is what Steiner meant when he called the farmers the new priests.
Wow.
That's interesting, isn't it? With what's happening as well with this onslaught. I mean, don't want to get too political, but there seems to be an onslaught on farmers today in the world, and it seems to be a focus, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting point there, Jeff, because also one of the ideas out there is that one of the things that people who choose the spiritual path, that see the earth as treat the world as an altar, or it's like they have an attitude towards science it's like the same, a religious devotion to another being. Those people are going to be the ones that begin to understand the mysteries of the etheric, the mysteries of growth, farming. And big industry wants us all eating like artificial burgers and whatever. I don't eat meat anyway, but that's beside the point. They want to become the sole providers of our sustenance, and I think the organic movement and this type of thing are interesting phenomena. It's like a resistance to this. There's a lack of belief in the wholesomeness of that project. No, I trust Mother Nature more than I do an industrial conglomerate. To feed me.
With the medical industrial complex too, we're getting not just the agricultural industrial complex. We're getting the same question: is it a Hobbesian nature, right? Or is it can we rely on our nature to provide for health and see the illnesses as the symptom for the cure?
Yeah. Jonathan's just saying he needs to go. Do you want to just say anything before you go, Jonathan?
No, just that this is wonderful. The sense of those with their hands in the dirt and the darkness of the soil are the ones that will be able to reconnect us to the heights of the spirit. This is wonderful. Goodbye, folks. It's been fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Cheers, Jonathan. Speak to you again soon.
I guess I'm going to be jumping in the garden this afternoon. I'll tell you that.
Okay, I think I've got one more slide. Yeah, before we could say so like the meaty stuff for so like fleshing out what, because basically we've been theorizing to a certain amount as like this being of the Sophia, Philosophia, Anthroposophia. And next time we meet, it would be nice to really go through. Okay, we mentioned the Osiris-Isis myth. How does that relate to it? The Hebrew culture, the Greek, what's going on? How is this evidence of the being of wisdom incarnating into humanity? This final slide here is when we look at the philosophy of freedom. One of the ways of understanding that this is more or less like a repetition of what we looked at the other diagram, but it's like divided up more clearly into it's like when she was involved in bodily development, when she was involved in soul development, and when she will be involved with like spirit development in humanity. It's like affecting directly that that process. I think unless you've got any like further reflections or questions, it might be a good place just to wrap up here.
So sorry, I just had a question on Anthroposophia being from 2100 to 4200. Is that something that Steiner said?
This the final chapter of the Riddles of Philosophy is where he introduces this being.
Right.
And why does he do it? Basically, he in the Riddles of Philosophy, he's mapped out how she has worked in the imparting of wisdom, thinking, through the conscious activity of thinking. She has imbued humanity with wisdom in this period here.
Mm.
And then the question becomes, is philosophy dead? Because this is also one of the things that comes up in the book several times. Hegel, Wale, and these people, philosophy is dead. It is, unless we understand how philosophy herself is maturing.
You see, I wouldn't say that any of these are dead. It's like, as a 49-year-old woman now, there's things that I learned when I was 7, and then there's things I've learned when I was 14 and 21. And I'm a composite of all those. I haven't forgotten those things. I am all of those. Just new bits of Sophia are coming along. So, and you know, when you mentioned about looking north and south before, there was this instinct in me that was like, no, we are north and south. Like this is a time of non-dualism, and we're other things as well. So, yeah, I'd say that we need to keep those. That they're almost like an arsenal of Sophias, a pantheon of Sophias, and I'm just struggling with the Anthroposophia. I mean, I know Steiner was into Blavatsky, you know, he was sort of with Blavatsky for a while, and that was Theosophia, and it's almost like did he create this one to be different, you know? And I know that's I don't want to sort of disregard that there's he must have had some inspiration when he put that in, but is there another type of Sophia coming? I actually think that it's a little bit egocentric to say that this next piece of history is about Anthropos. I actually think it's more about nature and the cosmos and those sorts of things. And I think Sophia is going to come out there in the next few thousand.
Yeah, you're right. So no, anybody listening to this thinking that the anthroposophical movement is necessarily a representative of Anthroposophia, they need to check that without going into too many details. But if we take the hysteria of the last couple of years and the decisions of important people in that organization, then we can see quite clearly that there is something wrong there. So identifying this being with an organization, that is a mistake.
Okay.
But saying that this, but if we think that his spiritual science research is correct, then this being is a real being that will be inspiring individuals to discover her wisdom. And it doesn't have to be based in Dornach.
I think you raised some good questions there, and I think the egotistical bit might be a key, or the egoism that might be a key to or a window, perhaps. Well, the ego is a window, isn't it? So the necessity of the development of individuality is the only way to achieve the universality of what it is to be a human being. And so when I hear anthroposophy or anthroposophia, I hear the wisdom inherent in human beings, and anthroposophia being the being who is the future of humanity as the individuation as a universalization. Got it. So it's a nexus point, and yes, I do believe there'll be another incarnation for us and for Sophia in light of this conversation.
She is the image that I use for myself is that she is that being that wants to reveal herself in individuals. And the more that she can do that, the more humanity will understand the wisdom that she has to impart. And there's no organization that can do that for us. It's individuals actively making that decision, individually taking that decision to devote themselves to wandering down that path and seeing how far they get.
That's true, but it's also true that we need institutions that support this kind of development. So we need an educational system that deals with the bodily development. We need a societal structure that supports the ensoulment process, and we need our spiritual institutions to remind us that our heritage is our fulfillment in the spiritual development.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's both. You're right. Absolutely correct.
Beautiful.
Pleasure talking to you guys. Well, we'll talk about the Hebrews and the Greeks and the Egyptians next time.
Yes, look forward to it very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to look forward to it. I'll just press. I'll press end stream.